How's it going, everyone? Video today is going to be a Q&A session. Now, I got these questions from Twitter yesterday. I posted out, so thank you for all those who did comment. So we're going to get to it now. But first thing, I want to say thank you for all the support that I've been getting from the channel over the last couple of weeks. We're growing nicely, and we're going to continue. So again, just a different style video today that I haven't done in a long time, a Q&A. So let's get to it. Right, so first question we've got, again, I'm going to pull them up on my phone. So, number one, what is the lowest hanging fruit and highest priority behaviours your average untrained man should adopt if they want to start putting on muscle? So if you want to start putting on muscle, and again, let's say you're untrained and you haven't stepped foot in the gym, it's going to be obvious, literally, just get in the gym consistently. Now, to caveat that, you want to come in on, and we actually want to be on a decent program that's going to give you frequent bouts of exposure or stimulus. So if you go back on my channel, there's a couple of splits I'd recommend for someone in the stage. Literally, if the full body split, you can run that for, again, about a year or so. Again, you've got 3 bouts of stimulus each week for the same muscle group. You're going to get it on a big run of progressions. Again, even an upper lower split would be fantastic. But your main priority and lowest hanging fruit is consistently training 3 or 4 times a week and then getting on a run of your progressions with your training. That'd be, from a training standpoint, that'd be the lowest hanging fruit there, getting on a good training program and doing it consistently. In terms of nutrition, first off would just be literally getting a good grasp of nutrition and tracking food. Where are your numbers at from day to day in terms of where are your total calories at, where is your protein intake at? Getting a good grasp on that, making sure you're eating around a gram per pound of body weight in terms of protein, getting around maintenance calories and just letting things settle for a couple of months, but having a good grasp of knowing what you are eating. And again, that will take you far. Just consistently training and just eating. That's it. That will get you a good part of the way. So that's the low hanging fruit up front. Next question. When transitioning from a cut to a bulk, can it take a few weeks to figure out the correct amount of calories? Maybe find the maintenance first and then increasing from there, considering the initial weight gain from glycogen and water balance. So, when I reverse somebody out from a cut, or you do reverse out from a cut, let's say you're cutting calories, you were on X amount, let's say 1800 calories as an example. Initially, for the first 2 weeks, I will raise someone right out. I will add around 500 calories. So if someone was on 1800, you just come to 2300 and you let that settle for a couple of weeks. There is going to be a more of a bump up in the scale for those first couple of weeks because of the extra glycogen and water retention. But you come right into around maintenance, an extra 500 calories on top of where you was, and then you let that settle. That's after around 2 weeks, you let that settle. Then, okay, if we're happy where we're at, we haven't spiked up too aggressive on the scale, which I'm sure you won't have done. Okay, so you've added 500 calories for the first 2 weeks. Okay, maybe layer in an extra 100, 150. Then let that settle for another 2 weeks. Let your scale readings, let everything feed back to you. Take your weigh-ins every single day under the same conditions, same time, same hydration status, all that stuff, and then get your weekly average. Let that feed back to you, and then all of a sudden you're going to have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks of data of your weigh-ins and where your food is at, and you will know if you can afford to add a little bit more food. But you've got to track your scale weights every single day, take your average, and then you go from there. So next one, how many carbs are you eating on a bulking versus a cutting phase? So for me personally, right now I'm on just over 600 grams of carbs a day in the building phase, so anywhere between 600 and 640, depending on the day. If it's a training day, it's close to 640, versus in a deficit. So when I was at the end of the deficit, I was still on 300 grams of carbs. So I'm basically on double the amount of carbs now in a building phase as I was towards the end of a deficit. Now that's not going to be the same for everybody. Some people can tolerate higher carb intake than others. Some people need to have a little bit more of a higher fat intake. Again, there's no right or wrong answer, it's just how your body responds to it. I respond better to higher carb and a little bit lower fat. That's just how my body likes to function like that. But you have to experiment with that. But obviously, you are going to be eating more carbs on a building phase than you are on a diet. Next question, again, good one. On average, how long does it take for the average Joe to go from 20% body fat to 10% body fat? If all variables are right on a cut, e.g. sleep, recovery, or what time frame would you recommend for that? So, if we're going to say the average Joe, now someone who's got a lot of experience with diet and it's not their first rodeo, someone can go from 20 to 10% in probably about 10 weeks. They could probably drop 1% of body fat per week. So someone experienced could go from 20 to 10% in about 10 to 12 weeks, pretty comfortably. Now that's someone who really knows what they're doing and has done this before. They don't struggle with diet and they have all of their boxes ticked. They know exactly what to do. Now let's just take the average Joe, who again might not have dieted before. You're gonna have to give yourself more time. So instead of being more aggressive with maybe 1% of body weight loss per week, so instead of maybe around 10 to 12 weeks where someone experienced could do it, someone who's not as experienced is probably going to need maybe closer to 16 to 20 weeks. Just give yourself more time. That's what I have found with, again, the average person. There is going to be some little slip-ups here and there. They're not going to be perfect week to week. So I would probably give someone, the average person, to go from 20 to 10%, a good 16 to 20 weeks. That's the average Joe. Someone who's more experienced could easily do that in 10 to 12 weeks. So 10 to 12 weeks for someone who's experienced, who knows what they're doing, maybe 16 to 20 weeks for someone who it might be the first rodeo. Right, so next question. If a guy is lifting in a gaining phase, but also wants to add training for a 5K run, how does that affect meal planning? So the first thing I would say is that these are totally different adaptations that you're looking for. You're not going to maximize either. You're not going to maximize hypertrophy or the gaining phase. You're not going to maximize that, or the endurance capacity that you're trying to train for with the 5K. They're both on opposite ends of the spectrum. So I wouldn't recommend that in the first place. But again, if you are going to do that, how does that affect meal planning? So I think the first thing, especially if you're in a gaining phase and we're trying to be in a slight surplus, you need to replace the energy expenditure from those runs. So if you are going to do 2 5K runs in a week, as an example, you need to replace the expenditure. Let's say that's 400-500 calories. You need to replace that with the food. Again, that should be obvious, but you need to replace that with, again, more calories coming in on the days that you are going to do the 5K to make sure it keeps you in the steady surplus that we need. That's the first thing. Then in terms of meal planning, it just be the basic structure of make sure you're having enough carbohydrates before the run, enough carbohydrates before training sessions. Definitely one thing I would recommend here, do not do a 5K run first thing in the morning and then go and try and train. Flip them around. Make sure the weight training is first and the 5K run can come afterwards or on a rest day. Do not do the 5K run first because it will have a very, very negative impact on your lifting performance. So, final question. What is the best form of cardio? Now, there's no best form of cardio. It all comes down, what's your main goal? What's your main priority? Are you trying to build as much muscle tissue as possible? Are you trying to become as fast as possible, i.e. sprints? Are you trying to train for a 5K, as our last example before? Are you trying to train for endurance? So it all depends. Best cardio for what? Now, I'm just going to take it in terms of body composition. Now, the problem with cardio, or too much cardio, is that it's going to have a net negative impact on your lifting sessions. If you're trying to get bigger and stronger, your lifting sessions are the priority, not the cardio. Now, that doesn't mean we remove cardio from our plan. Of course, some cardio in there is important. Again, heart health, circulation, again, mood enhancement. So many benefits of good cardio. So there's no best form. You've just got to find a form that is going to then work together with your lifting program. If you burn yourself out with too much cardio and you can't come in and train as hard as you want in the gym, but that is not what we want. So again, you've got to experiment. That's why I do like, again, things like incline walking, even walking with a weighted vest. It's not going to beat you down so much that your training is going to really suffer. Again, with things like hill sprints, assault bike sprints, too many of those, it's going to have a net negative on your lifting performance. But you have to be careful. And again, the worst type of cardio, when it comes to trying to build muscle tissue, the worst type is going to be long distance endurance style running. Two different types of adaptations. To get better at running, again, it's a lot more endurance style stuff. To get bigger and stronger, we're looking for hypertrophy adaptations. They're both on the other end of the spectrum. So for me, if someone is trying to build as much muscle tissue as possible, the worst cardio that you could do will be that long, slow, steady state running. It's just going to absolutely beat the legs down, and you're going to struggle to build as much muscle tissue as you possibly could. So that's where I do like things like steps, incline walking. I think they're very, very conducive to building as much muscle tissue as you can. Right, everyone, thank you for the questions. That is the Q&A done and dusted. So for the next Q&A, I'm going to be bringing one of these in at least once every month. So for the next Q&A, if you have any questions that you'd like me to answer, drop them down below, and this will be the first place, so the first priority where I will come to take the questions from will be the YouTube comments. So if you're watching this and you do have a question for me, drop them down below on this video, and I will get to it in the next one, and I'll make sure it gets fully answered. Okay? But again, appreciate the support, and I'll speak to you all in the next one.